Hey everyone, I'm Elizabeth Newsom and welcome to my booktube channel. So in honor of Tamara Leigh's recent release of The Awakening, today I'll be looking at 5 medieval romance books, all of which just so happen to be written by Tamara Leigh. Because as far as I'm concerned, I think she writes the best medieval romances. Our first book we have is The Baron of Emberly. So for some of these books, I've read them recently enough where I can give you a synopsis myself, but it's been a while since I've read this, and as stated previously, I do intend to reread it, I just haven't gotten to yet. So I'll be reading the synopsis provided by the author. A warrior dangerously in control. England, 1334. In the second book of the Feud series, Baron Magnus Verdun is a warrior whose handsome face gives little indication of the darkness he struggles to contain. While pursuing the murderous brigands who plague his lands, he becomes the unwitting savior of the woman the king has decreed he wed, the reckless Lady Thomasin, whose very presence threatens his carefully ordered life, and more so when she proves outspoken beyond what is required of a dutiful wife. Can he tame this woman whose willful ways ought to offend but instead captivate? More, dare he allow her near and risk exposing the secret that could push her away? A lady perilously improper. Despite efforts to make a proper lady of her, the illegitimate Thomasin de Aurel knows she is no match for the Baron of Emberly. Though she expects her new husband will think her beneath him, she is unprepared when he insists on separate chambers. When he also demands she control her behavior, the spurned Thomasin rebels, and unknowingly becomes the pawn of forces determined to further the feud. But upon finding herself in Magnus's arms, she discovers he is not as indifferent as he would have her believe. And when she glimpses his torment, she is determined to shine light on his darkness. Will he let her in, or will their enemies use their distrust between husband and wife for their own ends? The synopsis kind of tells you what the story is about at a glance, but it doesn't really describe all the things that happen within the book and the development of their relationship. So what I really like about this book is the heroine Thomasin is considered really plain, while Magnus Verdun is considered super handsome. But as stated in the synopsis, he has this psychological issue, and I'm just going to explain what it is because I don't want you guys thinking he's a psychopath or anything. Essentially, whenever he sees blood, he has these vivid and crazy nightmares where sometimes he's physically violent even in his sleep, which is why he insists on separate chambers. So throughout the book, he just kind of helps her with her insecurities and loves her, and they have a lot of tender moments together. And then Thomasin, of course, is really compassionate, so once she finds out about what he's dealing with, she just kind of helps him through it and wakes him up when he has nightmares and comforts him. And I don't think I'm really doing this book justice because it's such a very sweet romance. This is definitely one of my ultimate favorite books. Next, we have The Unveiling. So in The Unveiling, there's this sister, and she finds that her brother has been murdered, and she thinks this one guy named Gar Wolfrith did it. And Gar Wolfrith is in charge of this castle where they train up young men to be really skilled knights and warriors. So what she does is she disguises herself as a boy, and she goes into the fortress where he is to be trained so that she'll have an opportunity to kill him. Well, as you can imagine, things don't quite work out, and her identity is eventually unveiled. And it's funny, because the first time I picked this book up, I read the sample chapters, and I'm like, I feel like this start's kind of slow. There's not a lot of romance at first. I think I'll just go on to a next one. Well, then later I bought a box set with a bunch of romances, and this book was in them. So I'm like, I might as well read it. So I read the whole thing, and I ended up adoring it, and ever since then, I've made sure to read every single one of Tamara Leigh's books. This book was kind of what got me addicted to her writing. Then there's The Redeeming. It's in the Age of Faith series like The Unveiling is. So in this book, the main heroine is Gaynor, who's the younger sister of Gar Wolfrith, who's in the first book. By order of the king, she's betrothed to Christian Lavon. Except she really doesn't want to be married to him because he's kind of her family's enemy. And also, she slept with this knight before previously, and she knows that on their wedding night, Christian is probably going to find out that she's not pure. So up until the point she's married, she's hidden in this fortress where they train knights and stuff. But what she doesn't know is that Christian Lavon has actually been invited to go there so he can receive further training. And then they have an accidental meeting, and she doesn't know who he is, and he knows who she is, so what he does is he tells her that his name is Sir Matthew, and they kind of have this little romance thing going on, where she doesn't know who he really is, and that's kind of how they start falling in love. Of course, everything kind of falls apart later when she finds out that she's not really who he says he is, and also she tries to run away from the marriage, so that kind of messes things up too. But despite all the messiness, I just love this book and the overall theme and how it's about forgiveness and love. And then there's Lady of Fire. So in Lady of Fire, there's this mother and daughter living in Algiers in this harem. So what's happened is that the mother is married to this guy and she's part of his harem. And of course, her daughter is raised and grows up in that harem, and that's kind of all she knows. Well, then what happens is there's this English guy taken into slavery, and the mother buys him, and she says she'll give him his freedom if he takes her daughter back to England, because she wants her daughter to be back in England where she can have like a one-man, one-woman marriage, and where their lifestyle generally applies to Christian principles. So he agrees. But even though the girl is kind of attracted to him and interested in him, she doesn't really want to leave her home and her mom and just the place that she's known for her entire life. So he kind of ends up half dragging her to England. So even though they kind of hate each other at first, it ends up with a really sweet ending, and this is another one of her best books. And finally, there's Lady at Arms. So in summary, this girl is nearly attacked and raped by this guy. She sees the exact same guy years and years later, but as it turns out, it's not really the guy, it's an identical twin, but she doesn't know that, so she takes him captive. He gets really, really mad. He escapes, he takes her captive, and yeah. This is also kind of an instance where the characters go from hating each other to loving each other, so it makes for a lot of fun conflict. Well, there you have it, a summary of my top 5 medieval romances. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.